an understanding of what each entity's responsibility is and how they connect to the other entity.
Okay.
Maybe this is my background in manufacturing speaking, but when the quality department talks to me and they say we can't do something because there's a quality issue or whatever it is, it's clear cut. I know what the procedure is. If the safety department talks to me and says we can't get something shipped out or whatever because there's an issue, I understand the connection between my department and their department.
Right.
And I think that's what the breakdown is. There's nobody on. And part of it might be because we've had a lot of turnover on the Parks and Rec Board. That's probably part of it. But we do need to make it clear cut and get it in writing so that if we do have a turnover on our Parks and Rec Board, that these people, they come in and fill these places, can read up on it and say, okay, here's my position and here's what I do, here's what they do, and here's what the Public Works Department does, I understand the connection. Right.
So what do you think Huber Heights is doing now that is good and moving in the right direction?
Well, one of the things I think is good is that we've had several successful festivals lately, like a Marigold Festival. I mean that really showed off our city in a positive light. I just went to the Miami Valley Young Marines Pancake breakfast this morning. I went to that. I think those things show our city in a very positive light. I mean, we're hitting a lot of things right. We've got the soccer tournament. We got so many things going for us, and so we need to. There's sort of an old stigma that there's a lot of negative things going on in Huber Heights. I think we somehow need to overcome that. But like I said, we're doing a lot of things right. We got the farmers market. I mean, we got the football team. I mean, there's just a lot of positive things, and I'd like to see those things be exemplified versus the negative things that come out.
Right.
Now, you'll probably notice a lot of my postings on Facebook. I try to show the positive things going on here. It's like,
right.
There's
I've seen
many
that.
of them. I can't even get to all of them, So that's what I'm trying to do is portray a positive image of our city.
Yeah, I follow all the candidates, and I see a lot of your posts, and they are positive posts, and highlighting some of the good things. I've seen the one about the Miami Valley Young Marines, and for those listening, we did a podcast with the commander of that group, the Miami Valley Young Marines. And I think it's podcast number 2, so episode number 2. But anyway, it's a great organization. I'm glad you were out there supporting Mr. Miller and all them young guys and gals who work hard to keep that organization up. Good job.
Yeah, and the food was pretty good too, by the way, when I went out there. It was really good.
Speaking of social media, you're very active on social media, which for me, and probably a lot of folks that are listening, that's good because that's where we can get information quick and easy. How do you feel? But at times there are those who, different council members and things who will, lack of a better word, argue back and forth on social media about certain issues. I love a good debate. Debate is fine, but when it begins to get personal, that's a little different. That's stepping out of the boundaries of professionalism, in my opinion. So social media, going forward, if Dave Wilson, come November 7th, is elected mayor, how do you use social media, and how do you let's just say, how would you use social media?
Well, I would continue to try to use it as a way to portray our city in a positive light. There probably will be discussions where issues will pop up, and I think the citizens are going to ask for my opinion, and I think they deserve my opinion to come out and express, like I said, my opinion on a certain topic or whatever. I want it to be just like saying, well, here's my reason, and here's my criteria, and this is what I believe about this particular topic. I really don't want to break it into any kind of argument or go after somebody and do name calling or anything like that, or try to say something like that. I mean, if it's a debate, let's try to keep it professional. Here's my reasons why I support or I'm against a particular issue, and especially in the public, I can think it would almost be embarrassing at times to, I would say, cross over a certain line and, say things that really, like as you say, don't fall in the word, don't fall into the professional category.
Right.
I mean, these are our elected cities. These are our elected representatives. You're portraying our city. Now, as far as any kind of policy goes, like social media policy for our, city council members or anything like that, I'm as far as anybody elected goes, I'm not for it. It's such a fine line trying to interpret free speech and and the rights of an elected person to express themselves as compared to write some kind of definition of, well, you can say this but you can't say that. So
Right.
I'm not really for a social media policy, but I think I maybe might at times have to, as mayor, if I get elected, as mayor, remind people, can we keep it professional? Can we keep it to the topics and keep our personal opinion or personal feelings out of this?
Right. Totally agree with that one. Definitely. You may or may not know, I'm sure you do. You're very active at the council meetings and whatnot. In May, there were some charter review amendments, some charter amendments that were voted in. One, and I'm asking all the candidates about this one. The one was the city manager residency requirement. That's a hot button issue throughout the city.
It sure is, isn't it?
So what are your feelings on the city voted in May for the residency requirements to stay in 6 months. If you're not living in the city 6 months, the city manager has to move. What are your feelings on that? I'll just shoot it over to you.
Okay, I got several here, but as for the city manager residency requirement, the voters clearly stated at the ballot that they want their city manager to live within the city boundaries. To be completely honest with you and everybody in Huber Heights, I do not care where any employee of Huber Heights lives, including the city manager, but my opinion does not matter in this case. The citizens of Huber Heights have spoken, and they want their city manager to live within the city. So now it's up to the current mayor and the current city council to work together with the city manager and come up with a plan that somehow resolves this very litigious and controversial issue. I would really hope that that they resolve this issue before the next council and mayor starts in January, because I think it's going to be even a more challenge for a brand new council and a brand new mayor to try to resolve this. I mean, I think that the current council's got the best understanding of it. I would hope that they'd be the ones that take care of it. As far as one of the arguments, though, that I've heard on Facebook, though, is that, what if there's a disaster and our city manager lives outside of town, What if he has trouble getting into town because he lives outside the town or the city?
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, think of the example, too, of what if our city manager is on vacation? What if he's down in Florida or something, or Georgia or something like that, and then we have a disaster hit here in the city? Well, then that's the same thing, he's got to get back into the city, or what if he's just out, shopping in Cincinnati or something like that when this happens? He's got to get back into town at that time. I mean, we cannot mandate that our city manager 24 hours a day live within our city in case there's a disaster. So I'm not really for the residency requirement, but the voters spoke, and that's what they want. I think it's going to be very difficult, considering that the contract has already been written with the city manager, to go back and revise it. I just don't know how they're going to do that particular part, as far as revising it goes.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to give one more example, too, in this whole
Sure.
thing. When I was on city council, and I cannot remember the gentleman's name, but we had to shop for a city manager, and so we hired one. And the gentleman lived in Chicago, and that gentleman, he did establish residency in Huber Heights. He rented an apartment, and from what I was told from several members of the staff at City Hall, that at 5:01 on a Friday afternoon, he was gone. He was on the road to Chicago. He would go all the way back to Chicago and spend his time with his family, which is, I think, fine. And then he would be back sometime around midnight on Sunday, and then he would work all week in Huber Heights, and then go back on Friday 5:01, head back to Chicago. Then he worked for us for about 1 year.
Sure.
In that particular example right there, the gentleman did meet our residency requirement. But does anybody feel like he was dedicated to our city? Did he go to any of our weekend events or whatever? I mean, was he available on Saturday and Sunday in case of disaster or in case he was needed in any way, shape, or form? No, he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
By phone he was, but not by not by directly being there. So like I said, people can meet this residency requirement, but yet in all good faith, not really meet it.
Okay. Good points. Great points. Moving on. The last podcast I did was with your opponent, Jeff Gore.
Yeah.
So we talked about what had just happened was the city had voted down the settlement agreement with the cell phone tower and the companies T-Mobile versus the city, and it was another company, I guess, with them.
EcoSite's the one building the tower, and then T-Mobile's going to be the one that will then lease space on the tower. The primary person to lease space on the tower is what it is.
Exactly, EcoSite. So, what are your thoughts on that and the property rights that kind of circled all those issues right there?
Well, I feel for all the residents that are affected by this. And when I was on Planning Commission, we brought it up several times trying to get the church to move the cell phone tower into the middle of the property, and they just were not going to negotiate that or change that or whatever. I mean, they wanted to keep it on that one. I think it's on the eastern side of the property, and yes, it does affect the property rights of those people, let alone just the sight of a 180-foot tower looking out your back door. But the thing that's really difficult to overcome is the federal government and the Telecommunications Act. Not only is our city having big troubles and big issues with this, it's all across the country. I believe Richard Shaw was talking to several people at some of these meetings that he's gone across the country, and that's one of the hot button topics that they talk about is just how this Telecommunications Act comes in, and they just there's this cell phone towers popping up everywhere, and people have very little say in the process. So, as far as the settlement agreement goes, I think there was like three choices: you lose big, or you lose a little. I mean, all three sides of the equation where you lose.
Right.
As far as they were going to get their tower, they were pretty determined about that.
I
don't know how hard they looked for towers outside of that location. I mean, there were several other sites to consider, but they settled on that one, and they were just focused on it, and they just didn't think they were going to budge on it. So now we got to figure out some way to, if it affects the people that live behind it, if it affects their water, somehow to get water down to them and make it, if there's any kind of hookup fees, make it reasonable for them.
Good deal. Yeah, I thought City Council did a really good job with that. They examined all the issues. I thought Planning Commission, because believe it or not, sitting here in Texas, I do keep up on what's going on in Huber because hopefully I get to move back home soon. Yeah, I do keep up with what's going on, and I watch the Planning Commission on this, different things. So you guys on the Planning Commission did great. City Council did great. The lawyers, the city attorney and Tyler, they're a little nervous about the federal government's cell phone laws and different things, but hey, property rights need to be maintained. That's huge when it comes down. We don't really own our piece of land. We're paying taxes on it. So, what we do have, we kind of want to keep as private citizens. So good job all around.
Just one last thing on that.
Sure.
I think everybody in the Planning Commission wanted them to put that on that one old school that's up there on the Titus.
Titus, yeah.
In Taylorsville Road, everybody thought that was just a perfect location because it's not even really a school anymore. It's just a storage for the buses and some other other school functions like that. I don't believe there's any kids up at that school, but that's where we wanted it to go.
Sure.
And we repeatedly tried to bring it up, and they said something about there was some kind of designation that they could not do that.
Right. I'm sure what's and this is just my speculation here, is that the church and EcoSite and T-Mobile all have a contract. So they're probably not willing to move it anywhere because that contract's pretty sturdy. And then they got to redo all that stuff. And it's. Last podcast, we also talked about TIF districts and how those have affected Huber Heights. Would you care to share with us your thoughts on the TIF districts and things like that?
Well, when I was on City Council back in 2000, I think it was 11 at that time, I voted for and Council voted for the carriage trails deal, and it was pretty clear to us that there would be 4 different times, where we would come back with the not the adjustment or the assessment, but where they would, the city would kick in money on the whole thing,
Right.
And so I knew there's going to be like 4 of them, but I'm really surprised that there's been so many of them that have come ever since then. So I'm wondering if this TIF thing is being abused a little bit. I'm